Guadalcanal, October 24th, 1942, 10 p.m. In the pitch-black darkness of the Solomon Islands, American soldier Robert Deere grips his M1 Garand rifle. He's nervous. His unit, the 164th Infantry Regiment from North Dakota, landed on this island just 11 days ago. Now they're dug in next to Marines who are still using old bolt-action rifles from World War I. Robert checks his rifle one more time. 8 bullets loaded, ready to fire. Then he hears it. Through the thick jungle air comes a sound that makes his blood run cold. Thousands of Japanese soldiers screaming at the top of their lungs as they charge straight at the American lines. On the Japanese side, Lieutenant Kenji Yamamoto leads his men forward through the darkness. He carries a Type 38 Arisaka rifle. It's incredibly long, over 50 inches, with a barrel that keeps catching on vines and branches. His rifle holds only 5 bullets, and after every single shot, he has to manually work the bolt. Up, back, forward, down. 4 separate movements just to fire again. What happened in the next 12 hours would show the world why American soldiers had a massive advantage, an advantage the Japanese never expected. The M1 Garand could fire as fast as you could pull the trigger. 8 shots without touching anything else. The Arisaka required working a bolt after every single shot. 5 rounds total. This difference would decide battles. It would save American lives, and it would help win the war in the Pacific. Let me show you exactly how. The M1 Garand was invented by a Canadian-American designer named John Garand. He was born in Quebec in 1888 and moved to Connecticut as a young boy. His family worked in textile mills, and John showed an early talent for machinery and design. Even as a child, he was taking apart clocks and tools to understand how they worked. In 1919, after World War I ended, John Garand went to work at Springfield Armory in Massachusetts. This was the main facility where the US Army developed and tested new weapons. The armory sat on a hill overlooking the Connecticut River, with massive brick buildings filled with machine tools, test ranges, and workshops. His job was to design a new rifle for American soldiers. World War I had taught military leaders an important lesson. The side with more firepower usually won. Generals had watched as machine guns mowed down thousands of soldiers in single battles. They saw how artillery could destroy entire battalions. The war had been a brutal demonstration that industrial firepower could overcome courage and determination. Bolt-action rifles, which required soldiers to manually reload after each shot, were becoming outdated. These rifles had been the standard infantry weapon since the 1880s. Soldiers had carried them in the Spanish-American War, in the Boer War, and throughout World War I. But military thinkers realized the future belonged to semi-automatic rifles that could fire as fast as you pulled the trigger. But creating such a rifle was incredibly difficult. The weapon had to be reliable in mud, sand, rain, and snow. It had to work in the freezing cold of a Russian winter and in the sweltering heat of a Pacific jungle. It had to be accurate at long distances. It had to be simple enough for regular soldiers to maintain. And it had to be strong enough to handle powerful ammunition. Many designers had tried and failed. The French had experimented with semi-automatic rifles before World War I. The Russians had prototypes. The Germans had tested various designs. But no one had created a semi-automatic rifle that was reliable enough, simple enough, and affordable enough for mass production. John Garand spent 17 years perfecting his design. He tried dozens of different approaches. Early prototypes used a system powered by the primer of the cartridge, but this proved unreliable. The primer system worked fine on a test range but failed in field conditions. He experimented with different types of ammunition. The rifle was originally designed around a cartridge called the 2-76 Pedersen, but in 1932, General Douglas MacArthur made a crucial decision. MacArthur insisted the rifle use the existing 30-06 Springfield cartridge instead. His reasoning was simple. The US military had millions of 30-06 rounds already stockpiled. Changing to a new cartridge would waste all that ammunition and cost enormous amounts of money. This decision delayed production by several years, but it turned out to be fortunate. The 30-06 cartridge was more powerful. It could penetrate more material and stop enemies more effectively. The breakthrough came when Garand designed a gas-operated rotating bolt system. When you fired the rifle, some of the gas from the exploding gunpowder was tapped off through a small port near the muzzle. This gas pushed a metal rod backward, The rod was connected to the bolt, which extracted the empty shell casing and loaded a fresh bullet into the chamber, all automatically. Finally, on January 9th, 1936, the US Army officially adopted his design. They called it the US Rifle, caliber 30, M1. But everyone simply called it the M1 Garand. America became the first nation in the entire world to issue a semi-automatic rifle as standard equipment to all its regular infantry soldiers. Let me explain exactly how this rifle worked. The M1 Garand used what's called an N-block clip. This was a metal clip that held 8 rounds of .30-06 ammunition. To load the rifle, you pulled back the operating rod handle, which opened the bolt. Then you inserted the clip from the top, pushing it down into the internal magazine. When the clip was fully seated, you released the operating rod, and the bolt slammed forward, chambering the first round. When you pulled the trigger, several things happened in a fraction of a second. The firing pin struck the primer of the cartridge. The gunpowder ignited, creating high-pressure gas that pushed the bullet down the barrel at 2,800 feet per second. Near the muzzle, some of the expanding gas escaped through a small port and pushed against a piston. This piston was connected to a long operating rod beneath the barrel. The gas pressure drove the operating rod backward with tremendous force. As the rod moved back, it rotated and unlocked the bolt. The bolt extracted the empty brass shell casing and ejected it out the right side of the rifle. A powerful spring then pushed the operating rod and bolt forward again. As the bolt moved forward, it stripped a fresh cartridge from the clip and chambered it. The rifle was ready to fire again. All of this happened automatically. The shooter didn't have to touch anything except the trigger. After the 8th and final round was fired, the empty M-block clip was automatically ejected upward out of the rifle with a distinctive ping sound. This sound became famous. Some people claimed that Japanese soldiers listened for the ping because it told them an American's rifle was empty. However, most combat veterans dismissed this concern. In the chaos of battle, one small metallic ping was rarely noticed. A trained soldier could reload an M1 Garand in under 3 seconds. You grabbed a fresh clip, pulled back the operating rod, inserted the clip, and released. Compare this to bolt-action rifles, which required 5 to 7 seconds to reload with stripper clips. The M1 Garand fired the .30-06 Springfield cartridge. This round launched a 150-grain bullet at 2,800 feet per second, generating 2,656 foot-pounds of energy. The rifle weighed 9.5 pounds and was 43.6 inches long. One of the M1's greatest advantages was that a trained soldier could fire 40 to 50 accurate shots per minute. This was 2 to 3 times faster than any bolt-action rifle. The semi-automatic action meant the shooter maintained his sight picture between shots. He didn't have to break his position to work a bolt. The M1 Garand was also remarkably reliable. The gas-operated system cycled with enough force to function even when the rifle was dirty, wet, or fouled with carbon buildup. American soldiers fighting in the mud of Pacific Islands found their M1 Garands kept firing when other weapons failed. While America was developing the M1 Garand, Japanese forces relied on bolt-action rifles based on technology from the previous century. The Arisaka rifle family traced its origins to Colonel Nariakira Arisaka, who designed the Type 30 rifle in 1897. The goal was to create a rifle that combined the best features of European designs, particularly the German Mauser. By World War II, Japanese forces primarily used 2 variants, the Type 38, adopted in 1905, and the Type 99, introduced in 1939. The Type 38 rifle fired the 6.5 by 50 mm cartridge. It launched a 139-grain bullet at 2,500 feet per second, generating about 1,650 foot-pounds of energy. For comparison, the American .30-06 generated 2,656 foot-pounds, about 60% more. The most distinctive feature of the Type 38 was its extraordinary length. The rifle measured 50.3 inches overall. That's over 4 feet long. The barrel alone measured 31.4 inches. The M1 Garand was 43.6 inches overall. The Type 38 was nearly 7 inches longer. This extreme length came from Japanese doctrine that emphasized long-range marksmanship and bayonet fighting. The long barrel provided excellent accuracy at long range. In theory, a skilled marksman could hit targets at 600 to 800 yards. However, This extreme length became a severe liability in dense jungles. The rifle constantly caught on vines and branches. In jungle, where you couldn't see 50 yards, a rifle optimized for 600-yard accuracy made no sense. Inside bunkers or caves, the Type 38's length became an even bigger problem. The Type 38 used a 5-round internal magazine, loaded via 5-round stripper clips. To load, you had to open the bolt, position the stripper clip, press the rounds down into the magazine with your thumb while pulling the clip away, then close the bolt. This took 5 to 7 seconds. After firing, the soldier had to manually cycle the bolt through 4 movements. First, rotate the bolt handle upward 90 degrees to unlock it. Second, pull the bolt fully rearward to extract and eject the spent case. Third, push the bolt forward to chamber a new round. Fourth, rotate the bolt handle downward to lock it. This process took 2 to 3 seconds for a well-trained soldier, and crucially, it required breaking the firing position. A trained Japanese soldier could fire 15 to 20 aimed shots per minute at most. Compare this to the 40 to 50 aimed shots per minute that an American soldier could fire with an M1 Garand. The Type 99 rifle was introduced in 1939 as a modernized version. It was chambered for the 7.7 by 58mm cartridge, which fired a 182-grain bullet at 2,400 feet per second with 2,300 foot-pounds of energy. This was more powerful than the 6.5mm round. The Type 99's barrel length was reduced to 25.9 inches, making the overall rifle length 44.1 inches. This was much more manageable than the Type 38's extreme length. Early Type 99 rifles featured chrome-lined barrels, the first military rifle in the world with this feature. They had anti-aircraft sights, wire monopods, and dust covers. However, the Type 99 arrived too late to replace the Type 38 completely. This created a logistical nightmare. The two rifles used completely different ammunition. Units equipped with Type 38 rifles needed 6.5 by 50mm ammunition. Units with Type 99s needed 7.7 by 58mm ammunition. Documented cases show the consequences. On Guadalcanal, the Japanese 230th Infantry Regiment received 7.7mm ammunition for their Type 38 rifles. The wrong ammunition made both weapons and bullets useless. Compare this to American forces. Every M1 Garand used 30-06 ammunition. Every M1903 Springfield used 30-06. The Browning automatic rifle used 30-06. Machine guns used 30-06. One ammunition type for everything. Both Arisaka variants were bolt-action rifles based on the Mauser action. The Arisaka action was actually stronger than the American Springfield or German Mauser. But this strength couldn't overcome the fundamental limitation of manual bolt operation. The contrast between American and Japanese production reveals the industrial might behind each nation's war effort. From 1936 to 1945, American factories built 5.4 million M1 Garand rifles. Springfield Armory made 3.5 million. Winchester made 513,880. By January 1944, Springfield Armory was producing 1,000 rifles every single day. Winchester produced 600 daily. Together, 1,600 M1 Garands per day. These weren't rough weapons. They were precision-manufactured rifles with interchangeable parts, held to strict quality control standards. Springfield Armory rejected any rifle that couldn't group within 5 inches at 100 yards. Every rifle was test-fired. Parts had to be interchangeable between manufacturers. This massive output ensured that by mid-1943, virtually every American infantryman and Marine in the Pacific carried an M1 Garand. Japan produced approximately 3 million Type 38 rifles and 3.5 million Type 99 rifles, over 6.5 million total. But they never achieved the production rates necessary to fully modernize their forces. Many second-line troops still carried Type 38 rifles at war's end. Japanese production quality deteriorated markedly as the war progressed. Early Type 99 rifles were superb weapons. By 1944, so-called last-ditch rifles showed rough machining, simplified sights, wooden butt plates, and inferior wood. Chrome lining disappeared. Quality control suffered. Some late-war rifles were actually dangerous to fire. Most tellingly, Japan never managed to produce semi-automatic rifles in meaningful numbers, despite recognizing the need. Kajiro Nambu, the famous Japanese gun designer, developed a semi-automatic rifle called the Type Ko, but it remained experimental and never progressed beyond trials. Late in the war, Japanese engineers at Yokosuka Naval Arsenal reverse-engineered captured M1 Garands. They created the Type 4 rifle, modified for Japanese 7.7mm ammunition. The Type 4 held 10 rounds loaded with two 5-round stripper clips. Japanese engineers added a rubber recoil pad and a last round bolt hold open feature. In some ways, the Type 4 improved on the M1 design. But when American forces occupied Japan in 1945, they found the Type 4 program had produced parts for only 250 rifles. Only 100 to 125 had been assembled. This failure reveals the truth. Japan understood the M1's advantages. They had the technical knowledge to copy it, but they lacked the industrial infrastructure to mass-produce complex semi-automatic rifles. American submarines had strangled trade. Bombing had destroyed factories. The machine tools needed simply didn't exist in sufficient numbers. American ammunition production was staggering. The Lake City Army ammunition plant could produce 200 million rounds of 30-06 annually by 1943. Frankfurt Arsenal, Denver Ordnance Plant, and other facilities added hundreds of millions more. By 1944, American industry produced over 1 billion rounds of 30-06 ammunition per year. Quality control ensured consistent performance. Velocity variation between lots was less than 40 feet per second. Ammunition was packaged in 8-round clips, in bandoliers holding 48 rounds, and in wooden crates holding 240 rounds. This packaging made distribution efficient. Japanese ammunition production was complicated by the dual cartridge system. The 6.5mm round had mild recoil but lacked stopping power. It performed poorly against cover and thick vegetation. The 7.7mm round had better stopping power but created supply problems. Units needed the correct ammunition for their rifles. Mistakes happened constantly. Supply errors could mean troops had rifles but no ammunition, or ammunition but no rifles that could fire it. American rifle training was extensive and ammunition-rich. When a recruit entered the Army or Marine Corps, he went through basic training lasting 8 to 12 weeks. A significant portion focused on rifle marksmanship. The standard qualification course required engaging targets from 100 to 500 yards. Soldiers fired from prone, kneeling, sitting, and standing positions. They engaged single and multiple targets. Basic trainees fired a minimum of 210 rounds during qualification. Most programs allowed additional practice. Combat units preparing for deployment often fired thousands of rounds per soldier. The Army's field manual specified that soldiers should achieve 40 to 50 aimed shots per minute in combat. Training emphasized maintaining sight picture between shots, smooth trigger control, and rapid reloading. The Marine Corps, initially skeptical of the M1 Garand, developed even more intensive training programs. Marine doctrine emphasized rapid aimed fire, not spray and pray. Maintenance training was thorough. Soldiers learned to field strip, clean, inspect, and reassemble the M1 Garand. They learned to recognize malfunctions and clear them. This training paid off in combat. American soldiers knew their rifles intimately. Japanese rifle training emphasized different values. Japanese military culture stressed spiritual discipline and the philosophy of one shot, one kill. This reflected both spiritual beliefs and the practical limitation of bolt-action rifles. Japanese soldiers underwent basic training lasting 4 to 6 months, longer than American training, but less time was devoted to marksmanship. More time went to spiritual preparation, physical conditioning, and bayonet training. The official infantry manual devoted 3 pages to rifle marksmanship, but 12 pages to spiritual preparation and bayonet fighting. This reflected cultural beliefs that spirit was more important than material factors. Japanese marksmanship training emphasized precision at long range. The Type 38's accuracy at 400 to 600 yards was considered its primary virtue. However, this training proved largely irrelevant in Pacific jungles, where visibility was often 50 yards or less. Japanese training also emphasized bayonet fighting. Soldiers practiced daily. The Type 38's exceptional length gave it a reach advantage in theory, but Pacific combat rarely allowed for bayonet charges. Ammunition for training was limited. Japanese recruits might fire only 100 to 200 rounds during entire basic training. less than an American soldier fired just during qualification. This limited ammunition meant Japanese soldiers got less practice. Skills like recoil management, trigger control, and rapid bolt operation require repetition to master. Japanese soldiers simply didn't get enough practice. The cultural emphasis on spiritual factors over material ones extended throughout Japanese doctrine. Training manuals stressed that the spirit of the attack must be the primary weapon. The rifle and bayonet are merely extensions of the warrior's will. This philosophy worked against poorly equipped opponents, but against American forces with superior firepower, it proved disastrous. Now let's examine what happened when these rifles met in actual combat. Let's return to Guadalcanal in detail. When the 164th Infantry arrived on October 13, 1942, the Marines had been fighting for 2 months. They were exhausted, sick with malaria and dysentery, and still armed with M1903 Springfield bolt-action rifles. The Marines watched the Army soldiers unload with mixed feelings. They were glad for reinforcements but skeptical of the untested troops. They also noticed the M1 Garands and wondered if the semi-automatic rifles would prove reliable in combat. On October the 24th to 25th, the Japanese launched a major offensive to recapture Henderson Field. The attack involved approximately 7,000 troops from the elite Sendai Division. These were experienced soldiers, veterans of China, who had never been defeated. The attack was conducted at night, standard Japanese doctrine. Attacking at night negated American advantages in artillery and air support. Close combat in darkness would favor Japanese bayonet fighting. The Japanese charged with fierce yelling, thousands of voices screaming Banzai and Marine, "You die." The idea was to intimidate defenders and strengthen attackers' morale, but something was different this time. The volume of fire from American positions was unprecedented. Private James Cass of Company M, 164th Infantry remembered, "The Japanese came at us in waves. We could barely see them except for their bayonets catching moonlight. With our Garands, we could fire 8 rounds into them before they covered 30 yards. Each man was like his own machine gun. We'd fire, the rifle cycled itself. We'd fire again. No working a bolt, just squeeze, boom, squeeze, boom, 8 times. Corporal Michael Wojtek recalled, "I went through a dozen clips that night, maybe more, 96 rounds at least. Every time they charged, we just kept firing. They'd fire once with their bolt actions, maybe twice if they were fast, and in that same time, we'd fired 4 or 5 shots. The 164th companies were fed into the line as the attack developed, reinforcing Marine positions. The devastating semi-automatic fire helped stabilize the line at critical moments. Colonel Bryant Moore documented that his men expended over 250,000 rounds in 2 days. That's nearly 180 rounds per man. Japanese bodies piled up 30 to 40 yards from American positions. Marine Robert Leckie observed, "We thought they were green with their newfangled rifles. But when the Japanese charged, those Garands spoke with a voice we'd never heard. It was like a continuous roar, not the sporadic crack of our Springfields." On the Japanese side, Sergeant Masao Watanabe survived. His memoir describes, "We were told Americans were weak, that our warrior spirit would overcome their machines. Our officers said one Japanese soldier was worth 10 Americans, but when we charged that October night, it was like running into a wall of bullets. Every American seemed to have a machine gun. Our Arisaka rifles felt like antiques. We would fire once, work the bolt, then fire again. In that same time, the Americans had fired 4 or 5 shots. The tactics that worked against Chinese soldiers became suicide against American firepower. We couldn't get close enough to use our bayonets." Lieutenant Hiroshi Takahashi wrote in a letter found on his body, "The American automatic rifles are devastating. Each soldier can fire as fast as our light machine guns. When we advance, it sounds like we're attacking a position defended entirely by machine guns. Our men fall before they can work their rifle bolts for a second shot." After witnessing this performance, the Marine Corps accelerated M1 Garand adoption. By early 1943, Marines were receiving 22,000 M1 Garands monthly. By late 1943, frontline units were fully equipped. At Cape Gloucester in December 1943, Marines landed in torrential rain. Private Eugene Sledge later wrote that Garand was the most reliable piece of equipment we had. In rain that came down like waterfalls, in mud that sucked at you like quicksand, that rifle kept firing. The Japanese with their bolt actions couldn't match our rate of fire. When they tried to set up positions, we could put so much lead into the trees that leaves would fall like rain. Sergeant John Basilone, Medal of Honor recipient, noted, "The Garand gave every Marine the firepower of 3 men with bolt-action rifles. In the jungle, where you might only glimpse the enemy for a second, being able to fire multiple shots without working a bolt meant the difference between killing him or him escaping to kill you later." Let me explain the tactical mathematics that made the M1 Garand so dominant. An American rifle squad had 12 men, 10 carried M1 Garands, 2 carried Browning automatic rifles. Together, they could fire 400 to 500 aimed shots per minute. That's sustained fire, not just brief bursts. A Japanese squad with 12 men carrying Arisaka rifles could manage only 150 to 180 shots per minute, even with perfect training and maximum speed, less than half the firepower. At the platoon level, about 40 men, an American unit could deliver approximately 1,600 to 2,000 aimed shots per minute. A Japanese platoon might manage 600 to 700 shots per minute. At company level, 200 men, the difference became overwhelming. During the Henderson Field Battle, Company G of the 164th fired 30,000 rounds in one night. That's 150 rounds per man, while suffering only light casualties. Think about what a Japanese battalion of 800 men faced when charging an American company. They faced 8,000 aimed shots per minute, even accounting for darkness, confusion, and fear. This volume of fire created kill zones that human courage couldn't overcome. This firepower disparity fundamentally altered infantry tactics. American squads could execute fire and maneuver effectively. One team would fire as fast as they could, keeping enemies pinned down, while another team moved forward. The volume of semi-automatic fire could genuinely suppress enemy positions. Japanese squads struggled with this tactic. Their bolt-action rifles couldn't generate sufficient suppressive fire. A 6-man team with Arisakas could manage perhaps 90 to 110 shots per minute, barely a third of American firepower. This meant Japanese infantry often couldn't advance under covering fire effectively. The M1 Garand's superiority contributed directly to American island-hopping strategy success. American forces could land on hostile shores, confident in their ability to establish beachheads against counterattacks. The firepower meant smaller forces could hold larger perimeters. Statistical analysis shows American units with M1 Garands suffered approximately 40% fewer casualties than predicted for units with bolt-action rifles in similar situations. The M1 Garand saved thousands of American lives. The Japanese military recognized the problem clearly. Captured documents reveal increasing awareness of American firepower superiority. A report from Lieutenant General Harukichi Hyakutake, commanding Japanese forces on Guadalcanal, stated in November 1942, "Enemy rifle fire has density and accuracy beyond our expectations. Each enemy soldier appears to be armed with an automatic weapon. Our forces cannot achieve fire superiority, even with numerical advantage. Recommend emphasis on night operations and infiltration tactics to negate enemy firepower advantage." By 1944, Japanese tactical doctrine had evolved. Instructions for defenders of the Mariana Islands stated, "The enemy's automatic rifles and machine guns create an impenetrable wall of fire during daylight. All attacks must be conducted at night or under cover of adverse weather. Daytime movement invites annihilation." Lieutenant General Tadamichi Kuribayashi, the brilliant defender of Iwo Jima, wrote in January 1945, "The American automatic rifles are remarkable weapons. Each soldier possesses firepower equal to 3 or 4 of our riflemen. We must not waste lives in futile banzai charges against such firepower. Instead, we will make them pay for every meter of ground from fortified positions." Kuribayashi's defensive strategy was the most sophisticated Japanese response to American firepower. By avoiding charges and fighting from caves and tunnels, he prolonged the battle and inflicted maximum casualties. But even his brilliant tactics couldn't overcome the fundamental firepower disparity. The Battle of Saipan in June 1944 demonstrated the ultimate futility of charging against semi-automatic rifles. By early July, Japanese forces had been pushed to the northern end of Saipan. They were out of food, low on ammunition, with no hope of reinforcement. Their commander, Lieutenant General Yoshitsugu Saito, committed suicide rather than surrender. On the night of July the 6th into 7th, the remaining Japanese forces launched the largest banzai charge of the Pacific War. Over 3,000 Japanese soldiers and sailors, many armed only with rifles, some with swords, some with bamboo spears, charged American positions in a desperate pre-dawn attack. The charge was born of desperation and cultural belief. If they couldn't win, they would die with honor. Private Harold Agerholm of the 4th Marine Division was in position when the charge hit. Other Marines remembered. They came at us in the pre-dawn darkness. Thousands of people, soldiers and civilians, screaming, running straight at us. Some had rifles, some had swords, some had nothing. Our Garands never stopped firing. We fired until the barrels were too hot to touch. The ping of empty clips was constant. The Japanese with their bolt actions couldn't match our volume. They'd get one shot off, maybe two, before our rifles cut them down. Corporal John Miller recalled, "They came shoulder to shoulder, packed so tight they were touching. Our Garands gave us a rate of fire that turned the battlefield into a killing ground. As fast as we could pull the trigger, we fired. 8 shots, ping, reload, 8 more shots. The Japanese with their bolt actions would fire once, maybe twice, then our fire would cut them down. The charge resulted in approximately 4,000 Japanese deaths. American casualties were 650 killed and wounded. This 6-to-1 casualty ratio demonstrated what happened when courage met overwhelming firepower. At Peleliu in September 1944, Japanese tactics evolved further. Colonel Kunio Nakagawa avoided banzai charges and prepared elaborate defensive positions in coral ridges. His strategy was more effective than charges, but even in defense, bolt-action rifles proved inadequate. Marine Corporal R.V. Bergen recalled, "When we spotted a Japanese position, we could saturate it with rifle fire. 4 or 5 of us with Garands could put 40 rounds into a cave mouth in seconds. We'd keep their heads down while other Marines moved up with flamethrowers or demolitions." The rate of fire advantage worked both ways. On offense, we could deliver suppressive fire while maneuvering. On defense, if the Japanese counterattacked, we could stop them with sheer volume of fire. The Battle of Iwo Jima in February and March 1945 saw Marines facing the most formidable Japanese defenses of the war. The island had 11 miles of tunnels connecting hundreds of bunkers and fighting positions. Lieutenant General Kuribayashi forbade banzai charges, ordering troops to fight from prepared positions. His tactics were sound. The battle lasted 36 days instead of 5 days estimated. American casualties exceeded 26,000, but even Kuribayashi's brilliant defense couldn't overcome American firepower. Marine Private Jack Lucas, who earned the Medal of Honor at age 17, later said, "Without the Garand, we never would have taken Iwo. The Japanese were dug in deep, but when we assaulted a position, we could deliver such overwhelming rifle fire that we could suppress them while we closed in. 8 shots without working a bolt meant we could keep up continuous fire while moving forward." Sergeant William Manchester, who later became a famous historian, fought on Okinawa. He wrote, "The M1 rifle was our best friend in close-quarter chaos. Being able to fire 8 times without working a bolt saved countless American lives. I saw Japanese soldiers trying to work their bolt actions under fire, their hands shaking, fumbling with the mechanism while our boys simply kept pulling triggers. That split-second advantage meant everything. The Battle of Okinawa, April through June 1945, was the bloodiest Pacific battle. 180,000 American troops faced 120,000 Japanese defenders in 82 days of fighting. American casualties exceeded 50,000. Japanese casualties exceeded 100,000 military dead. The Japanese under Lieutenant General Mitsuru Ushijima fought from elaborate defensive positions, but even the best defensive tactics couldn't overcome American firepower. Private Desmond Doss, a medic and conscientious objector who earned the Medal of Honor, observed, "The Garands were firing so fast it sounded like one continuous roar. Our boys could keep Japanese heads down while I went out for wounded. If they'd all had bolt-action rifles, I never could have saved those men. With bolt actions, there would have been pauses when everyone was working their bolts. In those pauses, the Japanese could have shot, but with Garands, the fire was almost continuous." On May 4, 1945, the Japanese launched their only major counter-offensive. 5,000 soldiers attacked American lines in a coordinated assault with artillery support. This wasn't a wild banzai charge, but a real military assault with tactics. It failed anyway. Private Martin Brennan recalled, "They came at us in organized waves with fire and maneuver. They had good tactics, but our Garands never stopped firing. 8 shots, ping, reload, 8 more shots. The noise was incredible. The Japanese with their bolt actions would fire once, maybe twice, then our semi-automatic fire would cut them down. The attack resulted in 4,000 Japanese deaths versus 714 American casualties, nearly a 6-to-1 ratio. The sound of M1 Garand fire became a psychological weapon. The rapid rhythmic cracking punctuated by the distinctive ping demoralized Japanese forces. A captured Japanese training document from 1943 instructed, "The American automatic rifles create a sound like many machine guns firing. Do not be discouraged by this volume of fire. Remember your spiritual superiority and press forward with determination." But spiritual superiority couldn't stop bullets. Yukio Nakamura, captured on Saipan, told interrogators, "We were told Americans were cowards who relied on machines instead of warrior spirit. But their rifles that fired without stopping, it was like fighting a machine, not men. Our officers told us to charge with bayonets, but we were cut down 50 meters away." American troops gained immense confidence from their firepower advantage. Marine Corporal James Russell recalled, "Knowing you could put 8 rounds down range as fast as you could pull the trigger made you feel powerful. When the Japanese charged, you didn't panic. You just started shooting and kept shooting until they stopped coming, or you heard that ping telling you to reload." The United States military was planning Operation Downfall, the invasion of Japan itself, scheduled to begin with Operation Olympic in November 1945. Military planners calculated that invading Japan would result in catastrophic casualties. Intelligence estimates suggested Japanese home defense included 2.5 million soldiers with Arisaka rifles, plus millions of civilians armed with bamboo spears, swords, and improvised weapons. Production plans called for 500,000 replacement M1 rifles for Operation Downfall. Springfield Armory and Winchester were increasing production to 2,000 rifles daily by August 1945. International Harvester was opening a 3rd production facility. Ammunition requirements were staggering. Planners estimated needing 100 million rounds of 30-06 monthly just for rifles. This massive stockpile testified to the volume of fire planners expected M1-equipped troops would deliver. Japanese defensive plans discovered after the war revealed commanders understood they couldn't match American firepower conventionally. Secret plans called for massive suicide tactics, kamikaze aircraft and boats, suicide swimmers with explosives, using civilians as shields, close-quarters urban combat, and even biological weapons. The Arisaka rifle had been relegated to just one component of desperate defense. Japanese leaders knew rifles alone couldn't stop Americans. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima on August 6th and Nagasaki on August 9th, 1945, ended the war before Operation Downfall commenced. On August 15th, Emperor Hirohito announced surrender. Post-war analysis suggested American casualties in Operation Downfall could have reached 500,000 to 1 million. Japanese casualties would have been in the millions. The M1 Garand's firepower would have been crucial, but the human cost would have been terrible beyond imagining. In a remarkable historical irony, the United States equipped the newly formed Japanese self-defense forces with M1 Garand rifles in the 1950s. After World War II, occupation authorities dissolved the Japanese military, but with the Cold War emerging and communist forces threatening, the United States decided Japan needed armed forces for self-defense. Starting in 1954, Japan began rebuilding its military as the self-defense forces. The United States provided weapons through military assistance programs. The standard rifle provided was the M1 Garand. Japanese soldiers who had faced the weapon during the war now trained with it. They experienced firsthand the firepower advantage their predecessors had faced. Japan received approximately 150,000 M1 Garands. These rifles served until replaced by the domestically produced Howa Type 64 in the 1960s. Japanese military veterans interviewed in the 1960s and 1970s consistently cited American firepower, particularly the M1 Garand, as decisive in their defeat. Saburo Sakai, Japan's 3rd highest scoring fighter ace with 64 confirmed kills, stated in a 1965 interview, "We could match American courage, Japanese soldiers were as brave as any in history. We could match American tactics and training, but we could never match American firepower. Every American soldier with his automatic rifle was worth 3 of our soldiers, maybe 4. That simple fact determined the war's outcome in the Pacific. All our courage, all our spirit, all our willingness to die meant nothing against that firepower advantage. The M1 Garand's success influenced military rifle development worldwide for decades. Every major military recognized that semi-automatic rifles were the future. Bolt-action rifles became obsolete for frontline use virtually overnight. The Soviet Union developed the SKS carbine immediately after the war, heavily influenced by captured M1 Garands. The SKS was gas-operated semi-automatic, firing a full-power rifle cartridge, just like the M1. Soviets produced millions and distributed them throughout the communist bloc. China's Type 56 carbine was essentially a licensed copy of the Soviet SKS, spreading M1-inspired design principles even further. France developed the MS-49 semi-automatic rifle. French designers had worked on semi-automatic rifles since before World War I, but the post-war MS-49 incorporated lessons from the M1 Garand. Belgium's FN-49 was heavily influenced by the M1's success. The FN-49 was sold to numerous countries and saw service worldwide. Switzerland developed the STGW-57, an excellent semi-automatic rifle. Swiss designers studied the M1 Garand carefully and incorporated many principles. Italy produced the BM-59, which was literally a modified M1 Garand. Italians took M1 actions, modified them for detachable magazines, added select fire capability, and created a weapon that served into the 1980s. Even Britain, traditionally conservative in arms adoption, began developing semi-automatic rifles immediately after the war. The British EM2 was an advanced design that influenced later development. By 1950, every major military was either using semi-automatic rifles or developing them. Bolt-action rifles were relegated to second-line troops, training, or ceremonial use. The M1 Garand had started a revolution. The M1 Garand itself continued serving long after World War II. It remained the standard US military rifle through the Korean War, where it again proved superior to bolt-action rifles used by Chinese and North Korean forces. In early Korean War, massive Chinese human wave attacks were repeatedly stopped by American firepower. These attacks were reminiscent of Japanese banzai charges. Chinese forces had Soviet-supplied Mosin Nagant bolt-action rifles, Japanese Arisakas captured in World War II, and older weapons. Few had semi-automatic rifles. When Chinese forces attacked American positions, the pattern was familiar to World War II veterans. Americans with M1 Garands delivered overwhelming fire that stopped attacks with horrific Chinese casualties. The M1 Garand served until replaced by the M14 in late 1950s and early 1960s. The M14 was essentially an updated M1 Garand, with a detachable 20-round magazine and select fire capability. The M14's design clearly descended from the M1, testament to Garand's enduring design. Today, both the M1 Garand and Arisaka rifles are sought by collectors and military history enthusiasts, though for different reasons. The civilian marksmanship program has sold over 500,000 surplus M1 Garands to American citizens since 1996. These rifles, maintained in government storage for decades, allow civilians to own and shoot the same rifle their fathers and grandfathers carried. The CMP sales have introduced a new generation to the M1 Garand. M1 Garands remain popular in shooting competitions. The Camp Perry national matches in Ohio include specific M1 Garand matches. Competitors shoot vintage M1 Garands at targets from 200 to 600 yards. Modern shooters are often surprised by the M1's accuracy. Many original M1 Garands, some over 70 years old, can still group within 2 to 3 inches at 100 yards. That's excellent accuracy, even by modern standards. The distinctive ping of the ejecting M-block clip has become iconic in popular culture. That sound has been featured in countless movies, television shows, and video games. For many people, that metallic ping instantly evokes World War II. General George S. Patton's famous assessment that the M1 Garand was the greatest battle implement ever devised remains widely quoted. While this might be hyperbole, it reflects the immense value military leaders placed on the rifle. For the individual soldier on the front line, The M1 Garand might indeed have been the greatest battle implement ever devised. Japanese Arisaka rifles are also prized by collectors, particularly examples with intact imperial chrysanthemum markings. The chrysanthemum was the symbol of the emperor, stamped on rifle receivers to indicate imperial ownership. Before surrender, orders were issued to grind off the chrysanthemum from captured rifles. This symbolically released rifles from imperial ownership. Most Arisakas have the chrysanthemum defaced. Rifles with intact chrysanthemums are rare and valuable. Modern testing proves the Arisaka action is exceptionally strong, stronger even than the German Mauser or American Springfield. Some Arisakas have been safely converted to modern hunting calibers, testament to the action's strength. But despite excellent engineering and robust construction, Arisakas couldn't overcome the fundamental limitation of bolt-action operation. A strong action requiring manual manipulation after every shot will always be slower than a semi-automatic action that cycles itself. Interestingly, both rifles have seen combat in the 21st century, over 70 years after they were designed. M1 Garands have appeared in conflicts in Iraq, Afghanistan, and Syria. These rifles were supplied decades ago through military aid programs. Insurgent groups sometimes use vintage American rifles from the 1940s. Arisaka rifles have been documented in use by insurgent forces in Afghanistan and Myanmar. These rifles were captured by communist forces in China after World War II, then distributed throughout Asia. Some ended up in Afghanistan during the Soviet-Afghan War in the 1980s. Both rifles still function after 70+ years, testament to their robust construction, even if they're tactically obsolete against modern weapons. Let's return one final time to that October night at Henderson Field in 1942. Private Robert Deere and Lieutenant Kenji Yamamoto, soldiers on opposite sides, both brave men doing their duty. Robert Deere survived the war. He returned to North Dakota in 1945, married his high school sweetheart, raised 4 children, and worked as a farmer until retirement. He kept his M1 Garand. The rifle had saved his life more times than he could count on Guadalcanal, New Georgia, and Bougainville. In interviews late in life, recorded by his grandchildren, and donated to the National World War II Museum, Deere credited the rifle with his survival. That rifle never let me down, not once. In rain, in mud, in jungle so thick you couldn't see 10 yards, that rifle kept firing. 8 shots as fast as I could pull the trigger. It was like having a guardian angel made of steel and walnut. I saw men die all around me. Good men, brave men, friends. But I survived, and I think that rifle had a lot to do with it. When the Japanese charged, I could fire 8 times before they covered 30 yards. That gave me 8 chances to hit them, 8 chances to stop them before they reached me. With a bolt action, I would have had maybe 2 chances, 3 at most. Those extra shots saved my life. Deere died in 2003 at age 83. His M1 Garand was donated to the National World War II Museum in New Orleans, where it remains on display. A small plaque notes this rifle was carried at Guadalcanal, New Georgia, and Bougainville by Private Robert Young Deere, 164th Infantry Regiment. The rifle is worn from hard use, the wood stock dinged and scratched, the metal showing wear, but it still functions perfectly. Kenji Yamamoto died on the night of October 24th to 25th, 1942, during the attack on Henderson Field. His body was found after the battle with his Type 38 Arisaka rifle beside him. 3 rounds remained in the magazine. He had managed to fire only twice before American semi-automatic fire cut him down. Around him lay dozens of his soldiers, most with full or nearly full magazines, killed before they could effectively return fire. This scene, repeated across thousands of engagements throughout the Pacific War, tells the story of the M1 Garand versus the Arisaka rifles. It wasn't that Japanese soldiers were inferior. They were brave, disciplined, and well-trained. It wasn't that the Arisaka rifle was poorly made. Early examples were excellent rifles. Strong, accurate, and reliable. The problem was simple. Bolt-action rifles couldn't compete with semi-automatic rifles in combat. Manual operation after every shot created an insurmountable disadvantage against weapons that cycled automatically. 5-round capacity couldn't match 8 rounds. Slow reloading with stripper clips couldn't match fast reloading with M-block clips. The M1 Garand gave American soldiers 40 to 50 aimed shots per minute. The Arisaka gave Japanese soldiers 15 to 20 shots per minute. This 2 to 3-fold advantage in rate of fire, multiplied across thousands of soldiers in hundreds of battles over 4 years, created a firepower disparity that human courage couldn't overcome. Japan's failure to develop and produce semi-automatic rifles wasn't due to lack of understanding. The Type 4 rifle program proved Japanese engineers understood the M1's advantages and could copy the design. It was due to industrial limitations, resource shortages, and a military culture that overvalued spiritual factors and undervalued material ones. The United States spent 17 years and enormous resources developing the M1 Garand, then built the industrial infrastructure to produce 5.4 million of them. This investment paid off in thousands of American lives saved and in battlefield victories. The story of the M1 Garand and the Arisaka rifles ultimately tells a larger truth about World War II in the Pacific. Industrial might and technological superiority, backed by sound strategy and brave soldiers, determined the war's outcome. Courage and determination, while essential, couldn't overcome material disadvantages. From the steaming jungles of Guadalcanal to the volcanic ash of Iwo Jima, from the monsoon-soaked forests of Cape Gloucester to the blood-soaked ridges of Okinawa, the M1 Garand proved itself as more than just a rifle. It was a war-winning weapon that gave American forces a decisive edge in infantry combat. The distinctive ping of an ejecting M-block clip became the sound of American victory in the Pacific. It meant 8 rounds had found their targets. It meant another Japanese attack had been stopped. It meant another island had been secured. It meant another step toward Tokyo Bay and the war's end. Against it, the bolt-action Arisaka, for all its virtues of strength and accuracy, was fighting with technology from a previous era. The future belonged to semi-automatic fire, and the M1 Garand represented that future. In the final analysis, the Pacific War was won by many factors: America's industrial might, control of the seas, air superiority, excellent logistics, sound strategy, and brave soldiers. But at the individual level, where one soldier faced another across a few yards of jungle or volcanic rock, the M1 Garand gave Americans an advantage that no amount of spiritual training or warrior tradition could overcome. The Japanese soldier was brave, he was dedicated, he was skilled, but he could work his rifle bolt only so fast. And in modern warfare, rate of fire multiplied by accuracy equaled survival. The M1 Garand and Arisaka rifles now rest in museums, private collections, and occasionally in the hands of shooters who appreciate their historical significance. But in their time, in the desperate struggle across the Pacific from 1942 to 1945, one was clearly superior to the other. The semi-automatic rifle had made every American soldier a base of fire unto himself. That advantage, multiplied across hundreds of thousands of soldiers in hundreds of battles over 4 years, helped ensure Allied victory in the Pacific theatre. The last word belonged not to courage or spirit, though both sides possessed these in abundance, but to the mechanical precision of gas-operated semi-automatic fire. 8 rounds, 1 pull of the trigger for each shot. Then that distinctive ping, announcing it was time to reload and continue the fight. That sound, more than any other, was the sound of American victory in the Pacific War.